So when should you consider adjusting your pricing or doing these types of tests? Well, here are some guidelines to consider. Hi there, Kelsey Toner here, the founder of Guest Focused Tour Business Coaching, where every day myself and our team of incredible tour business coaches are helping you build a thriving, profitable tour business. Welcome back to our series on how to price tours, activities, and experiences for profit. We've been exploring the fundamentals of effective tour pricing, but also sharing some best practices, tools, and ideas from some of the most successful tour and activity businesses on the planet. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to test your pricing and how to make data-driven decisions. Putting it another way, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to encourage you to use or leverage some of the data that you probably already have to make better pricing decisions. Let's get started. So to kick things off, this is one of the really compelling reasons to use and leverage a booking software tool for your tour activity business if you are not already. It's going to help you a lot with analyzing your data and potentially even running some of these tests. So let's explore some of the essential metrics that we want to be keeping an eye on and some simple ways to test and improve your pricing. Okay, so what are some key metrics that we'd want to see from our booking software? And if we don't have booking software, then we'd want to calculate it ourselves. The first is revenue per tour. Most platforms will show this automatically in revenue reports. I would encourage you to track this monthly and compare year over year for seasonal businesses. The second is your occupancy rate or capacity utilization. This shows what percentage of your available seats are filled. This is the key insight that most operators miss, that if you are selling out weeks in advance, you're actually losing money. Ideally, you'd sell your last ticket just as the booking window closes, and selling out early means you might be priced too low. Customers seeing sold out or unavailable indicates that you are likely losing revenue. So how might we leverage this information? Well, if we see that we are consistently selling out 2 or 3 weeks early on weekends, we might consider increasing prices by 15 to 20%. If you're seeing that you are above 80% occupancy, then we might play around with some test price increases. And if you see numbers that are going the other direction, below 50% occupancy, we might consider some conditional discounting or promotions. A third key metric is your booking conversion rate. You can either track this via your booking software or more often in your Google Analytics goals to monitor website visitors and to see what percentage are ultimately completing bookings. This conversion rate information is going to be important as you're testing your prices. If you see a stable conversion rate as you've lifted your prices, that means that you probably have that pricing power. And conversely, if you see a declining conversion rate after a significant price increase, but still have that steady amount of traffic, then perhaps you are seeing some possible price resistance. Fourth is average order value. If you are adding upsells or bundling some of your tours and offering discounts, well, this is part of your pricing strategy. And if we see that your average order value is ticking upwards, then this is a great sign that those upsells, bundles, and packages are converting. A final important metric is that channel performance, especially for a tour operator who might be leveraging online travel agents like Viator, Get Your Guide, and others. And obviously, we'd want to be able to tease this information out to better understand our true customer acquisition costs. Okay, let's talk about some simple pricing experiments that we can run. There are two kind of core ways that we can think about doing this. The first is sort of a time period comparison. And so we might have pricing A in 1 month, and then we compare it to pricing B in 2 months. And what we're comparing are some of the metrics that we just ran through. So for example, let's say we want to test premium pricing on those higher demand days on the weekends. And so what we can do is we can look at this month and we can look at this month, and we can look at things like our average order value. We can look at things like the revenue that we generated within that period. We could look at things like the conversion rate, comparing these two periods. It might also be more useful to do a year over year comparison rate, especially for seasonal businesses, right? So if we're comparing, last month, which was May, to this month, which is June, or June to July, where we just know there's going to be seasonal demand changes there, it might be more useful to do that comparison to a past year to this year. The second is an A/B test. And so instead of comparing time periods, what we're essentially doing is saying 50%, let's say, of the traffic that might be coming to this particular tour page is going to see pricing A, and the other 50% would see pricing B. So you can imagine running an A/B test over the course of a certain period of time, where 50% of the people who go, okay, check availability button, and they start out, they're going to see price A, and the other 50% of the traffic will see price B. And then we can do the same thing. We're going to look at some of those key metrics. What was that conversion rate like? What is the average order value, etc. So let's go through some simple testing best practices for tour operators. Firstly, test only one price change on one product at a time. If you're making too many changes at once, it's going to be hard to interpret the data. 2, track only a handful of things and what matters most. Is it the total bookings you're looking to increase, your total revenue, your conversion rates before, during, or after the test? Thirdly, make sure you're running tests long enough. Think minimum 20 or 30 completing bookings or a sufficient number of conversions to draw meaningful conclusions. You can quickly Google statistical significance if you want to dive deeper into this topic. Next, know when to stop. If you see bookings drop significantly, like a 25 or 30% drop, then it's okay to end those tests early. You may want to avoid testing during peak revenue periods that are really important for your business, where you don't want to lose potential income during your busiest times. And lastly, focus on high impact changes. Test pricing adjustments that could meaningfully affect your annual revenue. Okay, so that whole section was focused quite a bit on data that you can use and leverage, especially using things like Google Analytics and your booking software. In this next section, we want to talk about the important qualitative data that you can get from guest feedback. This guest input can give you a lot of qualitative information as to the impact on the changes, on their experience, on their likelihood to recommend your tour activity experience to others. Let's go through some examples. Firstly, when testing, you might ask post-tour questions. Maybe we can ask our guides or tour leaders of what they thought about the value of the tour or whether or not they would recommend it to their friends. 2, during a testing period, we might want to have email follow-ups or some additional internal surveys or questionnaires where we might ask them, hey, rate the value for money of this tour between 1 and 10. We might even ask how likely they are to recommend this tour activity experience to a friend and essentially collect data around the Net Promoter Score over the 2 different control groups or over the 2 different time periods. Thirdly, we'll want to keep an eye on our online reviews, looking for pricing related comments. Seeing things like great value means your pricing is probably on point. Expensive but worth it means you might have room to increase. Or overpriced or negative comments about pricing, let's investigate whether or not it's positioning or actual price resistance. As with any guest feedback, it's important to look for patterns and not just individual comments. And sometimes you might find that there's not a whole lot of people mentioning price or mentioning overprice. And if you just did a test of a price increase, that might be a positive sign as well. And while this section, we've talked a lot about that qualitative feedback, we can of course be keeping an eye on and should be keeping an eye on our overall review scores, maybe on TripAdvisor or Google My Business, to see if our pricing changes are impacting our average review score. So when should you consider adjusting your pricing or doing these types of tests? Well, here are some guidelines to consider. We strongly encourage you to test increasing your prices when you are selling out or you have occupancy consistently above 80%. If your booking conversion rate is stable or improving, if your customer feedback is extremely positive and often mentions great value, that probably means you've got some pricing power. And lastly, if your competitors are raising their prices, there might be an opportunity for you as well. Okay, when should we consider promotions or potentially strategic discounting? When we have occupancy below 50%, if we see our booking conversion declining, if the competitive landscape has changed and competitors are significantly undercutting you, that might be a variable, or you're seeing consistent negative feedback about value in your online reviews. People are often asking us, when we're doing these pricing testing, can you give us some guidelines? Like, should we be doing like a 5% price increase? Should we do like 25? What about a 50%? What's too much? What's too little? And it's hard to give general rule of thumb recommendations. But I always love to tell this story because I think in most cases, tour business owners and operators were not testing a big enough price increase. And the short anecdote is just coming from Uber. And so if you're familiar with Uber surge pricing, essentially the way that works is if there's a whole lot of demand for Ubers, people that need a ride at a particular time in a particular place, let's say after a sporting event, then they implement this surge pricing, which means the price goes up. You're gonna have to pay a lot more for that same ride. This does 2 things. 1, it's gonna encourage other drivers or people to come to that area as quickly as possible because they're gonna get paid more to do that same trip. And it's actually going to discourage or dissuade people from actually booking or making that call as well. They'll say, we'll walk or we'll go outside of that area or whatever the case might be. And here's the real takeaway. The data scientists that were working for Uber and they published their reports were consistently surprised at how much they had to increase the price in order to drive that human behavior. Meaning, if it was only a couple bucks more, then they didn't see drivers rushing over and they didn't see people canceling. And that's why surge pricing is often so shocking if you've ever had that experience where sometimes you might be paying double for a ride. So keep that in mind when we're thinking about something like testing weekend pricing, and we know that we're consistently selling out early. we probably have a lot more pricing power, or we'll need to do a shift in pricing that's maybe closer to 15% of a lift or 20% of a lift versus those smaller like 2.5 or 5% lift. If we're actually want to do those same two things, which is encourage people who can come through the week and have that flexibility and that value is important to them, we'll fill our capacity through the week, and also discourage some of those people from booking on your peak Saturday, but there's still enough people there who will be willing to pay that price because they don't have the flexibility or they're really interested and they still see the value. So take that for what it's worth. It's a really interesting report, but we encourage you to use this testing framework so that you can find out. And you know what? It's very easy to change our pricing. Sometimes we get hung up thinking like, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. This is my new pricing forever. What if I price too high? I did a 25% markup. Now the world is ending. Well, then bring those prices back down. We encourage you to embrace that testing mindset. And remember, the stakes here don't have to be that high. Okay, let me talk to our multi-day tour operator folks for a second. If you've been listening along, you're probably seeing that there are some challenges that come with running pricing tests or multi-day tours. The first and most obvious is that we have lower booking volumes typically. There's just fewer overall customers. So it's hard to get statistically significant data. We also see longer booking windows, which also means these tests can take longer because people need more time to make that information. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be testing our pricing. It just means it's going to be a little bit more challenging. Here are some key metrics to keep an eye on. As a multi-day operator, I'd have a look at revenue per departure, not just by guest. I would also say that your booking lead time patterns are really, really important. Finding out when people are booking and how our pricing might be able to increase the amount of people that are booking earlier in their journey. I'll be looking especially closely at our upsells and add-ons. And like most multi-day operators know, what is the customer lifetime value? There is, in many cases, an increased likelihood of those repeat bookings. So what are some smart pricing moves for multi-day operators? Well, of course, if we are seeing trips sell out early and often, that's a great sign that we could increase our price for future similar departures. Strategic discounting like early bird or incentives or value-based promotions to get people to make their deposit earlier or pay off their trip balance earlier is especially important for multi-day operators because you could then leverage that capital to drive more demand and more lead generation. And finally, using wait lists aggressively at various different points are gold mines for pricing intelligence. It's a great way to measure potential interest in an upcoming trip, or if a trip sells out, we should be defaulting to a wait list to get a sense of how many people are interested in booking that departure. Potentially, we could add another one and very quickly drive sales leveraging that waiting list. So as you can imagine, as a general trend, we find that many small business owners aren't doing enough testing with their pricing, meaning that they're pretty consistently leaving money on the table. So we might want to think about this in terms of creating a rhythm that takes place every month or potentially every quarter. If doing this on a monthly basis feels a little bit overwhelming, then start with quarterly. Maybe what we're going to be doing is creating a dashboard where we are going to be running some of these pricing tests, and we're going to have just a handful of those key metrics that we covered earlier in the video. We want to get that data, whether that's pulling from our booking software or Google Analytics, and we're going to look at the results of that test. We're going to be doing what? Reviewing that customer feedback. Do we see any patterns either in the qualitative or quantitative data related to that particular pricing test? And then plan for your next quarter. Okay, do we see any tours that are selling out too early? Are there seasonal pricing changes or a new type of variable pricing or special pricing promo that we want to experiment with? And keep in mind, we're often doing those year-over-year comparisons to get the best possible data. Okay, so let's take some action. Let's think about creating our first pricing test. So first and foremost, let's look at any areas where we see those spikes in demand. Are we selling out early or selling out often? Have you tested or played around with some of the variable pricing that we have talked about? Secondly, we're going to need to get some of that data, right? So what are the key metrics that are going to help you decide if this pricing change was a success? Some of this might exist inside of your booking software. You might need to learn how to run a report or pull that data for a particular period of time. Decide what's most important. Are we looking at the total number of bookings? Are we looking at the average order value? Are we looking at how early people are booking? Conversion rate. Decide which metric matters most, and then execute that pricing test. It's as simple as that. In fact, before you go, let me know in the comments down below what pricing test you're going to do. Or if you want to share some data off of a recent pricing test that you ran in your company or your organization to inspire our community, that would work as well. If you haven't gotten our pricing calculator from this series, you can go to guestfocus.com/pricing. We've got a complimentary pricing calculator to help you with some of these tests. If you're enjoying this series or you're getting value from it, share it with a friend or a colleague. That would certainly mean the world to me. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in our next video.